Hey, everybody, welcome to another great episode of Catholic Laughter. I'm one of your hosts, Carl Kozlowski.
And I'm the other host, Scott Vinci.
Yeah, and, we're looking forward to a really great show tonight. Right now, as everybody knows, we are in the season of Lent.
Lent is here.
Time.
Yes.
Yes. In the official definition of Lent, for anybody who is amazingly clueless, is that it's a time of preparation and time for personal reflection and preparation for Good Friday and Easter. So we're looking at 40 days praying, fasting, almsgiving from Ash Wednesday to Holy Thursday.
Carl, I don't really I don't experience fasting. I experience what they call slowing. Like I grab the cheeseburger and I slowly take it in. Actually, you're not supposed to have meat on Fridays, but so I don't have the meat on Fridays. I've given up. Have you given up anything for Lent?
Well, I'll explain. Basically, I'm kind of a bad guy because I don't really give up stuff. But what I do is I try to add spiritual things every time I go through Lent.
What have you added?
At my parish, we're having a thing called March Matthew. Kind of like March Madness with the NCAA basketball tournament. Well, they're asking the whole parish to go through the book of Matthew, 30 chapters, 30 days. You read a chapter a day. Everybody's on the same page, vibing the same story about Jesus. And that's one thing. And
they make you dribble. They make you dribble a basketball at the same time while you're reading, don't they?
Yeah. What are you giving up? What are you giving up?
Well, apparently I've given up comedy because I didn't like that last joke. No, I'm just kidding. I gave up sweets. So I say sweets like candy because like I've had a cookie here and there or whatever, or Coca-Cola. I still like Coke, but like little candies and gummies, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about gummy fish, those Swedish fish, because on Fridays we can have fish. So maybe there's a loophole I can get to, and have the Swedish fish.
Yeah, maybe it's a weird rule that the Catholic Church allows you in Sweden to enjoy that, but not outside of Sweden, Scott. So watch out. Yeah. But I actually had a filet of fish this past Friday, and I got to tell you, I remember hearing great things about it when I was a kid, enjoying them. It was like the thing to do. But oh my gosh, man, this was horrible. It made me wish I was fasting when I tried to eat this thing. I mean, come on. It was like a little square of frozen fish, like about this. And they had it dumped in a deep fryer and then put a dab of tartar sauce on it. I'm serious, like a little tiny smidge. And then they gave you not even one slice of cheese. I got half a slice of cheese, half. And they had it hanging off the side of it into the box. Like it was just, I'm going to turn it in half and just go, and all for just $8.99. Thank you, McDonald's.
So much for presentation, yeah.
I could tell the owner of the McDonald's was Catholic because he wanted you to fast instead. But
eating that thing. That sounds like, because I get filet of fish on Fridays all the time, and some of them are really good. I think it just depends on the McDonald's you go to. So maybe those people just didn't care.
Yeah. I mean, they're in Little Rock. I mean, kind of the excitement of life is drained out of them. So that's the problem. Yeah. But we also went to Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday. That was kind of crazy. I getting smacked in the face with ashes. When I was a kid, I thought it looked like everybody was walking around with bullet holes in their heads.
I think it depends on the priest. Like some priests, you get a little, almost like a little dot, across, and it's tiny. It looks like someone put a cigarette out in your forehead. And then other priests make you look like Dick Van Dyke from Mary Poppins. You get out of there looking like some kind of chimney sweep or something.
Yeah, pretty crazy, but and then of course you have to go back to work. Yeah. And in a big city like where we started out in Chicago, everybody's doing it because Chicago's like total Catholic city. But then in Los Angeles, you still got a lot of Catholics. You get to Little Rock, Arkansas, where I live, part of the Bible Belt. And people just look at you like, you got something on your forehead. They don't even understand. Like all afternoon, I'm walking around my office and people are going, "Ah, you got something there. You need to wash it off." And I'm like, "No, no, it's a spiritual thing." And they're like, "What are you, into voodoo or something?" I was like, "Well, Catholicism." So, but
You got something on your forehead. What is that? It's the gospel according to Luke. No, I'm kidding.
yeah. So, we're about 2 weeks into Lent now, and 4 big, exciting weeks to go of
Yeah.
fasting and praying and almsgiving. So, we're with you, folks. We know what it's like, but it's all going to come out wonderful
Yeah,
when
and
we hit
we're
Good
almost to the
Friday
finish
and
line.
Jesus.
Yeah,
Yep,
we're almost to the
yep.
finish line. But
And
you
then you
know
get
what,
the big
Carl?
out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Then you can have all the meat you want. Meat lovers
Yes.
pizza. You know what time it is, Carl?
What?
It's time for
Saints Corner.
Yeah, well, this week, not only is it Lent, but we're giving a shout out to everyone's favorite saint to party with, St. Patrick. That's
St.
right.
Patrick.
Yeah, give it up. Yeah, that's right. We're first airing this for St. Patrick's Day. And so we hope everyone's getting their green on and hoisting a few cold ones at your local pub. But he wasn't exactly how we were taught, right?
Right, he wasn't exactly Irish. It's kind of hard to believe, but he was. He, it says that he was the Saint of Ireland, but he wasn't Irish. He was from England. He was born in Britain. He did set foot in. He didn't set foot until Ireland until he was kidnapped and he was brought over as a slave at 16 years old. So
Wow.
yeah, he wasn't from
Yeah.
Ireland. I mean, what's next? What are they going to tell us next? There's no leprechauns and Lucky Charms. That's the biggest leprechaun I've ever heard.
Well, but even weirder, Patrick was not his original name. His birth name was, in fact, Maywin Succat. It could be Succat, but I like to call it Succat because all I can say is his parents suck at naming kids. And Maywin, I'm sure he had girls lining up to date him. More like May lose.
Okay, so he was also kidnapped and brought to Ireland as a slave. When he was 16, he's captured by slave traders in Britain, and he claimed that St. Patrick said that he deserved to be kidnapped for his lack in faith of God at the time. So talk about
Wow.
self-flagellation. Like, I know we all have doubts sometimes, but I've never wanted to like get myself kidnapped and say I deserved it. That's next level Catholic guilt right there, Carl. I'm telling
Wow.
you. Yeah.
Well, strangely, he also claimed to have seen visions and heard voices. I mean, while he was enslaved in Ireland as a teenager, he was praying to God very regularly. And eventually, as his faith grew, he claimed to hear holy voices that guided him. The voices told him how to escape from slavery. But then at the same time, right after, he got visited by an angel that told him to go back to Ireland and make a Christian. So, I tell people that I bet people thought he was crazy because he was able to do completely opposite things by people he couldn't even see. Like, what if the whole time he just had schizophrenia?
Yeah, like those voices weren't angels. They were just him talking to himself. Who knows? We don't know. But also, Carl,
Yeah.
another fun saint fact, green was not the color that he actually wore. Contrary to popular belief, St. Patrick did not wear green, but he wore blue. Why blue? Because I think he was depressed to be a slave in Ireland. That's what he was, literally blue all the time, sad. I think we've just been. He liked blue. I think he just liked blue over green. We've been leprechauned. That's what
Oh,
happened.
God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
I
these
think,
jokes write themselves. They're not the greatest all the time. Come on.
yeah, we apologize for that one officially.
Yes.
So, but here's another weird fact. There were no snakes in Ireland for him to banish. So the reason why people think that St. Patrick was, walking around with a giant staff and like having snakes like run away from him, or well, not run, slither away. Sorry. Everyone knows snakes don't have feet, but of course I forget that. But they're slithering away from him, and he like had them slither into the sea and get him off of Ireland. But in reality, archaeologists have found no evidence of snakes or reptiles of any kind having ever been native to Ireland. So it was believed to just be a metaphor for driving non Christians out of Ireland. I could just see him co-starring with Samuel L. Jackson in Snakes on a Plane, except they had to fight them across a whole island. I'll apologize for that one too.
Sometimes these jokes write themselves, and sometimes they don't, and we just keep going, folks. That's all. That's all. But they're also not exactly sure where he's buried. They think he probably passed out in a field somewhere after tying one on, or that's what we think anyway. And you know what though? At least we don't have his beheaded skull like so many of the other saints we've talked about. Like there's always like a piece of their body somewhere that they keep in glass. And
everybody goes running to go see it. Oh my gosh, it's the head or the tooth of so and so.
Yeah,
and I don't know. I wouldn't build my vacation around that. You only get 2 weeks a year. Come on.
Yeah, when in Rome, don't go see the bones of your favorite saint. Just go have some good Italian food. All right. So that has been
Saints Corner.
All right, Carl, tell us who we got today. We have a very special guest today.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited to have him. He's a comedian that we both met 25 years ago, and we knew he'd be a star. John Roy was the $100,000 grand prize champion on CBS's Star Search competition. And he's performed at some of the biggest comedy festivals in the world, including the HBO Comedy Arts Festival and the Just for Laughs festivals in Chicago and Montreal. His albums Dressed for Recess, or actually more like Dressed for Recess, Alexander Hamilton, and Everything's Burning are all heard regularly on Sirius XM radio. In 2024, his reels on Instagram have received over 3 million views. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for John Roy.
John Roy.
All right. Well, thanks, John, for joining us.
Good to be here.
So, yeah. It's been a while. Yeah.
In your own home.
Wonders of technology. But yeah, man. So we met you like back 25 years ago, I think, because I believe at the Map Room, or else I saw you and invited you over to the Map Room. That was a big show we ran we had a group called Chicago Comedy Works, and you were like one of the people starting to break out over there. And so anyway, just any memories about the comedy scene at that time, or
Map
Room?
Which, by the way, I gave you that footage of the Map Room. Did you ever watch that footage?
Yeah, I absolutely saw that footage. Yeah, what? It's crazy how much bigger I thought it was then. And it's not like you have that, you always hear that about your old grade school or whatever, but like I was an adult, I wasn't a smaller human being, but something about it's not like there's no reason that the place should seem gigantic in my memory, because I'm the same height and maybe have even shrunk since then. But I definitely remember just having your own show was such a big weight on, and so the place seemed much bigger to me. I go back and look at it. I don't think you could have fit more than, like, when we were packed, absolutely our number one biggest show when we had Lewis Black. I don't think there were more than 100 people in there. I don't think it was possible. Like it was a little bar, but like in my mind, it was huge.
Yeah.
I also remember one time when the Bulls were almost eliminated. Like the only time they were almost eliminated, when Reggie Miller missed that second free throw, and that was it. And going to the owner and saying, please don't, if the dreams of Chicago are crushed, don't make me go run a comedy show right afterward. And he was like, no, dude, you got to do it. And so I remember just sitting there, never having rooted harder for the Bulls in my life. I knew that if they lost, it didn't matter. I was going to have to do that show.
Yeah, that was crazy. But so then, or Scott, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so let's get into this. One of your early things was you won $100,000 on Star Search. We want to know.
I did.
What did you do with the cash, and how fast did your career take off after that?
The cash, what did I do? I moved to LA and I bought a car. I paid off some debts, and then I actually lived off it for about a year, which was probably dumb. I should have invested it. But I came to LA and I bought a car, and then I started doing, trying to be a comedian, which my career really was sort of like didn't really take off for a while, because when I first won Star Search, I got sent out to headline, and I couldn't, like, I had about 30 minutes, and I had
Oh, wow.
done about all the best stuff had been cherry picked for the show. So I had to go out and do like improvs and, fairly large venues that I wasn't ready to fill. And I got dropped by my PA agent, and I kind of didn't know what to do. I did some colleges, and then it was I got a showcase in a college, and I got about 40 schools. So by the end of that college tour, I was a headliner, but it took me a good year and a half of doing it. And thank God for those colleges, because that let me kind of learn on the job, because I had to fill much more time than I had. And some of those shows were, in the daytime, and the students, you didn't know, what you were getting when you showed up. So I would say that as far as an actual comedy career goes, I didn't have one until about 2 years later, when I had enough other material to get on some other TV shows, so that comedy club bookers were like, all right, he's not just, he's still doing things, and he's still generating material. I'm not just going to get the Star Search set again if I book him. So I would think by about 2006, I did Last Comic Standing and Ferguson and Premium Blend. And like those credits were enough to like look good on a poster for a booker. And so I would say that, my actual like doing stand up, like I still had to figure out how to be a headliner. Like I got out of middling, and I got known by a bunch of clubs, but it wasn't enough. And one thing we also found is that the Star Search audience were like moms and kids. They weren't coming out. So we didn't have there wasn't some live following that I had been handed by the TV show. Like they were more fans of Star Search than any particular winner of any particular category. I think they really just wanted to watch more people try to win the contest. They weren't necessarily like, we loved that one dude. So it was kind of an eye opener, but I didn't really know what to expect. I just kind of went out to LA being like, this is where you go, So, but yeah, that was about 2 years of sort of fumbling around as the Star Search winner, trying to turn that into actual gigs.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And so then, how did you fall in love with comedy? I mean, was your family funny, or did your passion for performing develop later as an adult?
No, they were funny. I have a big, typical Irish Catholic family on my mom's side. My dad's family isn't necessarily funny, but was anyway. He's dead now, but he had a subtle kind of dry sense of humor, but he was an introverted guy. So it didn't come out all that often. My mom's family is funny. There's my Uncle Charlie's really funny. Like there were definitely funny people to have as an example. And my parents were big comedy fans. They would listen to, Bob Newhart and Nichols and May and all the big albums from that time. And so they would get a comedy album every Christmas. Weirdly enough, that was one of our traditions, even when I was like 12. So I got to listen to like Carlin and, just a lot of pretty solid comedy albums before I was even, 14. And I remember very specifically when I first even knew that something like stand-up comedy even existed, because my Aunt Margaret got me Billy Crystal Marvelous, because I was in a Saturday Night Live, but that's all I really knew. And so then I get this album and I'm like, wait a minute. So Billy Crystal doesn't only do what I see on NBC, which is not anything you really understand as a kid. You're like, the celebrities do the things I know they do.
Yeah.
So the idea that Billy Crystal had an act that if you went to a theater and paid money, you could see him do this whole other act. And he wasn't just some guy they hired and they said, okay, your part is to be Sammy Davis Jr. Here's your wig here. The idea that Billy Crystal had done something on his own. And then they said, we like that guy. Would you also do this show? So I must have memorized that Marvelous album. And I was 9. So not only did I not get anything dirty, which is probably a third of the album, I didn't understand who these celebrities were. He's doing impressions of Ricardo Montalban, but I don't know who that is, but it's a funny voice. So, Leonard, Sugar Ray Leonard, the people he's doing are these very specific, baby boomer era impressions. And
Yeah.
it's sort of like when you're a kid and you're watching Scooby-Doo and they're like, this week, Phyllis Diller and Don Adams. And you're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know who those people are, but
Yeah.
they're people. Hey, they look funny enough. They seem to have fun with the dog. All right, Don Adams, here we go. So
yeah.
that's sort of how I felt about Billy Crystal. But then once I understood that there was this whole other world where some of the funny people, and then you get into that thing where you're like, okay, does he have a stand-up album? Like, no, he's just an improviser. Like, okay. Like, you don't know who has it and who doesn't. But I think Billy Crystal Marvelous is when I first understood what stand-up was, and I must have memorized every track on that record. By the time I was 10, I could do it all. Even things that don't, the jazz guy, like stuff that does not wear very well. I still learned every bit on that record.
When you're talking about the albums, comedy albums, my folks, they kept buying me records from Bill Cosby, and now as an adult, I'm like, yeah,
I had too. I had himself. I had himself. I had a very funny fellow. I had to my brother who I slept. I mean, like, until you know what's going on, all those albums are great, and then you find out, and then you listen to them later, and you're like, oh, there's a lot of clues here. There
was one album they accidentally got me of. It was like what they didn't realize that one. It said something like early and late or something was the title, and it was like one side was a show for families from Vegas, and the second side was his late night show. And like I looked back at the back cover of that recently, and it's like Spanish Fly is an actual track. On the
thing. Yeah, I've got that record. Spanish Fly is a track on there. And then so much of his albums, he's like ripping on his wife for being naggy, and you're like, you're complaining. Like,
wow, that's crazy.
I had Stephen Wright. I think that was. I mean, I had Stephen Wright's album from the '80s as a kid, but also I remember from the library. Like I checked out cassette tapes from the library, but they were like old radio comedians, and it would be like the Jack Benny Hour. And
I listened to my dad had all that stuff too. And you're a kid, you don't know what all the jokes are about being cheap, and you don't have any idea what money is. And my dad's like howling. I'm like, what? Oh, he didn't want to tip the butler. Tip what? Like what? I don't understand.
Well, that's what he was known for, and that's why it's so funny.
Yeah, he's cheap. Like all the jokes only work if you understand.
If it's only about Jack Bunny, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, so you grew up Catholic with a big Catholic family, and you went to Catholic school, correct? You went to Catholic school?
Yes, I went to Sacred Heart Schools on Sheridan Road.
Do you have any stories about those Sacred Heart? Any Catholic when you were a kid?
I went in. I'm Gen X, right? So we were tiny as a generation, as a class. So my Catholic school experience was pretty odd. We only had 14 people in my 8th grade class.
Wow.
It was because like my generation's so small. So and then I went to the public high school. My high school was built for 5,000 people in the early 70s for the baby boom kids. But for the Gen Xers, we only had 2,500 people in that school. So you carry that over to a much smaller Catholic school, which was a sort of, I got sent there because my parents, my dad grew up with Sacred Heart nuns. And so like, that's where his education was. It was the only school of that in the city. And it was sort of like a upper, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure it's obscenely expensive to go there now. Back then, it was the 80s. It wasn't a lot of money in the city. So, it wasn't insane to send your kid to Sacred Heart. But now I think you have to take out a loan or, to go there.
College.
But it was, and we were at a pretty low point in the school's enrollment. Like I had 14 people in my 8th grade class, and we had a trailer for the music class. Like, so your music class literally in a trailer out behind the back of the school. But it was, I don't know. I didn't really like it. I didn't like that the boys and girls were split. I liked some of the teachers. We had some good teachers. We had the nun who ran it was great and had the kids' best interest at heart, but 14 boys together for 8 years is a recipe for some nasty bullying. You really
get to know each other.
Yeah, and if you don't like them, well, there they are again, and here they are again, with no new people to speak of mixed into the equation, and all the girls who would be the civilizing influences are trapped on their own floor and are not able to assist you in any of these situations.
Yeah.
So it was sort of, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what other choices my parents really would have had though, because they could have sent me to the parish school, which was fine, but it wasn't that great. Like academic wise, like they, so I don't know. They did the best they could. It was an odd time too, because the classic boomer stories of Catholic school, those nuns were either gone or 90.
Yeah.
So, like, even the one like Sister Donato was the closest to what you think of as the classic, Catholic school nun that doesn't take any crap and has all sorts of weird hangups about dead saints and but she really couldn't frighten us because she was so old at this point. So, like, even if she like was really on a banger, you'd sort of be like, "Sister, are you okay? Like, do you need to sit down?" You just kind of took some of the teeth out of the whole, oh, do you have that nun? And you get the horror stories from the generation previous, older brothers and aunts and uncles, and you're just like, yeah, but she was 40 for you guys. Like,
Yeah.
factor in a whole lot more energy and pep into those hell sermons.
That's funny. So what was your best experience doing the road, and what was your worst? I mean, I'm talking probably
Well, the
like
worst,
the
I
early days.
absolutely know. I mean, I can tell you 100% the worst experience I ever had was the
Period.
closest I've ever felt to actually like hunger, like real hunger.
Geez.
I was a feature. I had booked my flight to a day early. So I flew into San Antonio, Texas to middle for Jimmy Pardo at the whatever that there was a chain that they had like a chili pepper on their sign. I honestly don't remember what color.
They always have ridiculous logos. Yeah.
I don't remember. It was in a mall. There was nobody there for the most part. We were right by the Alamo. We were right above a family restaurant where this robot cowboy around 10 a.m. started going, "Welcome to the Buckhorn," about every 15 minutes. "Welcome to the Buckhorn." So that's going down. And I have no food. I've got no money. I had to take the day early because there's no other plane ticket I afford. I could not eat until it was time to eat the chicken fingers at the club on my Thursday, but I'm there a day early. So it's Wednesday. I got nothing. There was an egg in the refrigerator. That's it. There's nothing else except one egg. And I cooked it and I ate it because there was I don't know where it was from. I don't know, but that was it. I had to eat that egg because there was nothing else that was in my stomach until another 24 hours. So, I mean, that's definitely my, I got paid and got back on my feet, all that good stuff. But that was the one moment where the system broke down and John had no food. So I think that's probably the worst.
Was that pre-Star Search or after Star Search?
That was pre-Star Search. I think that was 2000. Okay. I was a middle. So yeah, that was before Star Search, 2000, 2001 maybe.
Wow.
So I would say that's probably the worst. The worst the joke's ever done. I used to have a joke where I went, I'm depressed. I got an envelope. Apparently I've been pre-denied for a Visa card. And I got no laughs. I was in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I got no laughs at all. And a woman goes, "That's not possible." I was like, okay, this is gonna be a long night.
That's awesome.
Like, she didn't even, not only did she not get the joke, she didn't understand jokes. like she was like fact checking the opening line. I'm like, we're not gonna have fun tonight.
Those are the toughest nights when you've got to do 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever. And in the first 2, 3, 5 minutes, no one's liking your material. And you're like, oh, well, here we go.
Sometimes you can find something else, but there's other times where they just don't want what's on your truck. And it doesn't matter which of the things you serve them or what order you show them in. They just don't want it. And you have to your job now is to just be up there in the way of their future happiness for the amount of time that the club owner said you had to.
a movie comes out or a TV show, it's based on a book, everyone goes, oh, but the book, it's always so much better. Not always. Books depend on me. I have a horrible visual imagination. I can barely draw. HBO has 57 artists with master's degrees in making medieval armor. Their version of Game of Thrones is going to be way better than the piece of crap production my brain put on with the castle from He-Man.
Well, so you've written some animated pilots and some other shows. So I'm asking, what would you say inspires like your writing process for stand-up and for scripted? And right now, are you working on some other projects too?
Yeah, I'm working on stuff. Right now, I have a column now in Vulture called The Great
Good
Bits.
stuff.
Right?
Good stuff. Yeah.
I just talk about different stand-up bits that I think were the best, and then kind of show what the comedian was doing to make that happen. I think a lot of people, when they review stand-up, they only talk about the words. They just talk about what the guy said or what did it mean? Was it controversial? And then they leave it at that, and they don't talk about like how he did 6 character voices leading up to the punchline, or how he started low energy and he ended up high energy. Like those things, like what the comedian's actually like thinking about up there, usually get sort of lost in journalism about comedy. So I wanted to change that. And I've written about 20 of them or so. And I'm looking to, my manager feels like we might be able to sell a book. So I'm trying to figure out what to add to that while keeping, they want them monthly now. So I had to ramp the schedule up a little bit. So that's kind of the most near-term thing I'm working on. Up in the summer, I was writing on a podcast Ron Howard did called Employees Only for Imagine and iHeart. And that was fun. At the end, they didn't get the listener base they would want to sustain their budget. So we just did, I think, 12 weeks of that. And then that was it. So I just got done with that this summer. And I'm trying to put the book together now. I sold my online free comedy class got sold as a book in China. So I want to ask about that. Yeah. But that's Chinese. So I can show you the translation they sent me, but your guess is as good as mine. How good they did.
That's funny.
Wow, that's crazy.
Hey, I have a quick question. Carl and I were wondering because we were talking. We're like, didn't John and Mick Betancourt, didn't they used to hang out? Weren't they like?
Oh yeah, Mick was at my wedding. I went to college with Mick.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
You guys still keep in touch? Like, what's he up to?
Yeah, he's on Reacher now. He's on what? Jack Reacher.
Oh,
no way.
For season 3, he's going to be one of the producers on Reacher.
That's great.
Out for Amazon. So I mean, that's a big gig. Yeah, Mick's doing great. Yeah. He lives in North Carolina now, I think, with his family. Yeah. Wow. And he, he's got a resume a mile long. He did Law and Order, SVU, all sorts of shows. But yeah, we keep in touch. I mean, obviously he's not here anymore, so I don't get to see him. But
have you ever been on one of his shows? Like, did they ever?
No, I never.
You need to call him and tell him.
Well, I don't really need to be a rape victim, or
I was going to say,
or a burn victim, or really a lot of the things that
the rapist. Yeah,
yeah. There's not a lot of really fun parts on SVU.
Well, just for the listeners who didn't know who Mick was, he was a brilliant comic along with John and the whole scene we were in, and he went on to become a major TV writer on really gritty shows. But how did he wind up doing crime shows, by the way? Because that's a lot different than comedy.
People always tell you write what you know, right? So when Nick grew up with criminals,
that's right, yeah.
And also, his father-in-law was a police sergeant, so there was a lot of stuff in Mick's background where when it was time to to write stuff that he had, a pretty good firsthand, experience of, that tended to be on the drama side of things. It wasn't. I mean, and God knows he tried to make it funny, and some of those scripts are funny, but Hollywood never really wanted to make the kind of subject matter that Mick was good at writing as a comedy. It always ends up being a straight crime drama.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So then, so you've been on Conan, The Tonight Show, Last Comic Standing, tons of other shows like that. So
Yeah.
after those, is that when you felt like, yeah, I made it? Or was
I
Star
don't
Search
think
when
I
you
ever
realized I
felt
made
like
it?
that.
Huh?
I don't think I ever felt like that.
Oh, really?
I mean, I had a career for a good 20 years. I was making pretty good money, and I had a lot of things, but at no point, any one of those, I took some time off. So now I'm back, but, I'm also a stay-at-home dad and a freelance writer. And, I have not been able to go fully back into stand-up to the extent that I was before. My wife has a big high-powered job. She has to travel. So I've got to be there for the boy. So it kind of precludes hitting the bricks as fervently as I used to. I mean, I'm going up pretty regularly now. The Long Beach Laugh Factory puts me up a lot, and the Comedy Magic Club in Hermosa. So like I'm getting back in onto stages and onto shows, but I'm never gonna have that 50 week a year hot chops like I once did. But in all that time, even when I had good years when I wrote on specials and sold pilots, and years when I, got really good road work or to tour for JFL or whatever, it's still, I didn't know where the most I'd be was booked out like 7 months. So like, unless you're, someone who really did achieve something where they know they'll tour forever, like if you're, you even, and it doesn't have to be Bill Burr necessarily, but even someone like Gabe Kaplan achieved enough success with Welcome Back, Kotter that he knows he's always gonna have a gig. But like until you're that person in show business, I don't think anyone goes to bed going, I did it. Because you can't, you can't know that. Like think about some of the people who were the biggest stars you could ever imagine when we were kids. Some of those people are dead. Some of those people are still working, but a lot of those people aren't doing anything as far as we know. So like show business is just never a career where, like, I'm sure there were moments where Vanilla Ice was like, I am about to embark upon an Elton John style domination of the charts that's never going to end. And in 2 years, he was selling jet skis in Miami, So, I definitely had some achievements where I was like, wow, look at what I did. I just did the I just did the Tonight Show. I just did my second Conan. But at the end of the day, that's a SAG check and maybe a couple hundred social media ads. Even my biggest clips that have been seen by, like, for example, like on Instagram right now, like I just had a reel that had 750,000 views. Like, we got about 1,000 followers out of it. Now what? Go do some more shit. What I mean? I always felt it like.
By the way, Gabe Kaplan plays poker, doesn't he? Like that's what he does.
I think he does actually, but then he actually does stand up because sometimes he loses in poker. I've heard there.
Well, and what was your favorite? What was your favorite late night show to do? Well, do you have a favorite?
Conan is the best. I felt that they were the most warmed up. That crowd's the hottest. And I asked Conan about it, and he thinks it's that he had the hottest band, that his band was better, and that the way they warmed the crowd up, and they had certain songs they would play that hold that note. They would hit the trumpet guy would hold a note for like ever, and the crowd would go crazy. Like he feels that big brassy big band type band he had was why his crowd was all jacked up more than the other shows were. I liked doing Leno just because it's the Tonight Show, and even though it's not the Tonight Show, which was the Carson one, it still felt like I was doing something that had a history to it. Ferguson was tough because he wouldn't be there. So half the time, sometimes he would, sometimes he wouldn't. Sometimes you'd tape it with a bunch of other people, or you just tape it. He'd be gone, and you'd tape it as like an afterthought after the show. And you could always feel the difference in the energy when the host wasn't there. Like there's something about the host sitting behind you laughing that legitimizes the show in the audience's eyes, and makes it work. The idea that you would just leave the stage for any part of your show being taped made no sense to me. That's just somebody that didn't care that much,
Yeah.
Do you Do you want to get on like the Tonight Show like now with Fallon?
Sure,
Like,
I would love to get on the Tonight Show with Fallon.
I think you'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's just and they're putting comics on. Not a lot of people are like him and Kimmel are pretty much it. Colbert puts one on like every couple weeks maybe, but it's not a steady thing.
I know.
Yeah.
I wish it were.
I'm not jumping on any nerd bandwagon. I'm just from a time when it was so shameful to be a nerd that I'm only okay with talking about it now, 20 years later. If you wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons when I was in high school, you needed 3 friends who could keep a secret. The first rule of Fight Club was absolutely the first rule of Pretend Wizard Fight Club.
Who would you say your favorite comics were growing up, and how about currently? Like,
Oh,
so I know growing up you had that Billy Crystal album.
Billy Crystal growing up. Yeah, and Carlin and Pryor, I think, were when I was growing up. But, you know, you were limited by it was 1989. Comedy had only been going on for like the way we think of it with albums and stuff since the 60s. So there wasn't as much to choose from. I liked Robert Klein when I was a kid, Child of the 50s. That album was influential to me. Nowadays, I would say Kyle Kinane, a guy that I came up with.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think he's the best. I love Patton Oswalt. I think he's only gotten better. And now that he's like a dad and has more life experience and stuff, he's been able to still make comedy without, he's not still yelling about Star Wars, like there's been a progression. I would say, John Mulaney, I think is great. Of a newer comic. Roy Wood Jr., I think is one of the best comedians working today. That Black patriotism bit from Father Figure is just unbelievable. I really wish he would have gotten the Daily Show. I think he absolutely deserved it. But I mean, obviously, you get Jon Stewart back, you're going to do it. But I feel like they missed out on something that could have been really great.
Wow. So then, who's your favorite comedian that you've met and worked with? And I mean, if there's
Luckily, I've worked with all those guys. The good thing about being a comedian and having a long career is that there are very few people that I have not met, that I have not worked with. And some of that has been great. Some of those have been really disappointing. You meet certain of your idols and you're like, this guy's a real jerk. That I wish I never knew that. But I've been lucky. I got to open for Martin Short at the Chicago Theater. Wow. Which was a huge thrill to me. I got to meet Eugene Levy, Harold Ramis. I've got to meet Chris Rock. I've gotten to meet I've never met Jerry Seinfeld. Certainly there are people that I've never actually talked much to Adam Sandler, but I've met Kevin Nealon. I'm like so many of the people I did Kevin Nealon's show at the Laugh Factory, and my first time on stage was literally stuffing a gray sweatshirt with old t-shirts to be Franz in a Hans and Franz sketch. So like I'm now standing on stage at the Laugh Factory. Oh, I got to meet Gary Shandling. That was incredible. I got to work with him in Hermosa. I pitched him a tag. He didn't like it. That was like, But I pitched Larry Miller a tag and he did like it. So take that, dead Gary Shandling. Gary Shandling's one of my all-time heroes. The Larry Sanders Show is the reason I pursued a career in showbiz. Like that was the show I saw when I was still just a college student. I wasn't a comedian yet. That was the last thing I got to see and sort of really absorb just as a fan and not as somebody who knew how to do it and was measuring up themselves or how well they did. Like all those thoughts that creep into your head when you're now doing comedy as well. I was the last thing I got to just enjoy like everybody else, so that was amazing to meet him.
Go ahead, Scott. Sorry.
Big question here. So Carl said you have a video. It's called the Into the Trump Minds, or Trump versus Bernie.
Trump, right? Bernie. We did a couple things with that. We did Trump versus Bernie on Fusion. We did 2 specials for them, and I helped write the At Midnight hour-long episode where they did. Trump versus Bernie was James Adomian playing Bernie and Anthony Atamanuik playing Trump.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Anthony Trump is one of the best. I mean, and he had an uncanny way of just improvising things that he would later go on to do. And it was just Tony. Like, that was one of those things where I came on to write these TV specials, but they had already been doing that show as a live show for a year and a half. They had gone to London. They had gone all over the place with that Trump versus Bernie show. And so I already knew they were already doing their guys. And you just had to kind of, because they were improvisers, they don't always, when you work with improvisers, they just go out there and sort of barf their words on the stage and don't always really, they're in the moment, they're inside it. So your job at that point is to go, hey dude, do you remember saying that? Remember that this other thing didn't work, this did, so let's hone the stuff that did. But you never had to get in that guy's mind, because Tony lived there for a year and a half. And there are all sorts of clips on Twitter of things that Trump would later do in his presidency that they had already done as a bit.
Wow.
On like even January 6th, they had Trump refusing to leave on the show. Like, there were things that were really amazing that he nailed before anybody else did. And he had, we did stuff with Chris Christie, like all sorts of stuff that, I mean, I'd have to go back and look, but there were definitely things that we did in those videos in 2016 that would later come true over the next 6 years.
Any chance of doing a Trump versus Biden or no?
I feel like they've kind of all moved on. Like Tony now, he's on What We Do in the Shadows as he's the neighbor. Adomian just put a record out and is doing a whole other round of impressions.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So like, that was just a thing that those two guys happened to do, those two guys. And they did it, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think Adomian's done Biden, but it's not anything that like he's, he kind of picks his impressions of what, and right now on the new special, I think he does John Laffer from Bar Rescue. I think he's doing, and then of course the big one he does is the My Pillow guy on Kimmel.
Oh God.
Doing Lindell, and he's been doing Lindell now for 2 years on Kimmel, and they've done about 15 segments. They're really funny. So
yeah.
That's sort of where his concentrations are right now.
You know what? So we need to get going. We're gonna wrap up here in a little bit, but I wanted to ask you, what? Well, there was something I was gonna ask you. Not the question we have written, Carl. I just thought
I'm like, read.
What I have is not this.
Yeah. I got something important, but not. Here it is. What's next for you? What's next for you? What do you want to do? Like, if someone said,
I don't know. Like, I took 2 years off, like 1.5. I have a pacemaker, so I couldn't do any comedy during COVID when there wasn't a vaccine yet. Like, that just was out of the question. So I took that year off, and then our child was born, and I had to take another year off. And so now, like, he's getting preschool now, and so I'm able to get back into it. But I'm getting back into a career that looks nothing like the one that I practiced for. You know what I mean? Like, I did comedy in a world where you were trying to please about 6 or 7 people that held the gates to different TV shows and festivals. The Montreal Comedy Festival just went bankrupt. They're not doing it anymore.
What happened?
No Montreal this year.
Is it only this year?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think they're done. I don't know the full story, but part of it is that the Montreal government is very French focused now, and I don't think they like giving subsidies out to any English speaking thing. So I think that's part of it. But also, I feel like they overexpanded, and they don't have the cash to keep their operation going. So, and Netflix just started a festival in California. I don't know what that.
Netflix is a joke. Yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
one.
So I don't know, but the point is, like, the whole comedy world that I built my career for, the world of late night TV spots and comedy clubs that booked based on, their own reputation, and then your job was just to make strangers laugh. I should have been making myself famous during all that time. So I have to step back into this where, I have to get more of an online presence, and so what I actually want to do, what I want to do is I want to record the stuff that wasn't quite ready when I first got out of comedy in 2020 in March. So I had about 45 minutes, I'd say half of it is still usable. Other stuff is either dated or just never quite came together. So I want to hone what I know now is another decent album, get that on Sirius XM, and then go from there. But that's the immediate goal. And then for my writing, I want to get the book deal together and try to sell that. And then go from there. I have some screenplays that I need some revisions to, that I want to try to get back out there. And, but I'm lucky enough to have a second chance at all of this. And while I'm still relatively young and I still have it, I've been out there. I've got the chops. They're back. I know how to write a joke. I know how to tell a joke. So now it's just how do I have less time to do this than I used to. I have lots of other things in my life, and I would never trade that for anything. I love my marriage. I love my family. I love being a dad, all this stuff I get to do, but it takes a lot of time. So I'm not going to be that single-minded one-track individual that I was I was single for most of my comedy career. I was never married. I never had any attachments, except, to the act. So I just have to figure out what can I do with what I've got? And, where can I make the biggest impact? So when I have answers to that, I'll be right in there. But in the short-term goals right now is to get this material done to where I feel it's worth recording, find somewhere good to record it, and get it out there. And then after that, we'll see what happens next.
So where can people find you? Give out your socials for anybody who may not know you in our audience.
Yeah, if you want to see a lot of my stuff, I've just started putting stuff on Reels these last couple months, and I've got a ton out there, and I've got some that have been very successful. I have 5 that are over 200,000. Wow. And all that stuff is on my Instagram, which is John Roy Comic, at John Roy Comic. And from there, you can find me on Threads, which is also in the Zuckerberg extended universe. And you can find me on Facebook. Also, Instagram will take you right there. But I would say if you want to go on the social media that is most likely to tell you where I'm going to be doing shows, I always put whatever my upcoming dates are right there in the bio. And it's got a link to my half-hour special that I taped during COVID. And it's got a link to all my Vulture articles, which are all on my archive page. So just John Roy Comic on Instagram. And I think there's even some grown-up Catholic jokes on there too, for your audience.
Well,
wow. Great.
We look forward. We want to work with you on one of our shows coming up.
Sure, I would love to do it.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. So we'll let you know when we get a good booking for you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. It's good to see you, John.
Until next time, everybody. This is
both of you.
Catholic Laughter.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
All right. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
CatholicLaughter.com brings live stand-up comedy shows to your church, fundraiser, or event. For more information or to inquire, go to CatholicLaughter.com and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.